I'm using a Prezi today. And so far, out of everything that I've seen so far, I've not seen other people use Prezi. This is a free presentation software that is a little bit more unique, I would say, than PowerPoint. I get bored really easy with technology, and so I'm always trying to use sort of the latest things here. And so in terms of social media, that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, Instagram in particular. When you think back to, social media, I didn't have a MySpace page. That was sort of, I was too busy at the time, I think. I was an early adopter of Facebook when it was thefacebook.com, and you had to have a .edu email address to even sign up to Facebook. And so I started that account in 2004. That account is now deleted because to me, Facebook is just sort of, I look at that as MySpace now. It's old to me. It's dated at this point. Twitter, I found that I didn't have anything very profound to say in 140 characters or less. So Twitter was not the medium that I wanted to use to incorporate social media into my classes. I am obsessed with pictures. I love photography. That's a side hobby of mine as well. And so that's where I arrived at using Instagram in my economics courses. And so I created a professional account for my students. I have a private account for myself that is, hence the word private. Students cannot follow that. But this is a public account for my students that I started. And Instagram is great because students are glued to their phone these days. If you look around in your classes, what are your students doing when they're not paying attention to you? They're looking down at their phone. And so, this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that we've all witnessed, and we will continue to witness it. The phones will probably just get larger and more obnoxious. So I said, how can I appear a little bit cooler to my students? How can I relate to them, get them slightly interested in economics a little bit? And so I said, well, let me create an Instagram account for my economics classes. Let's incorporate some humor in there. Let's do some graphing on there. Let's have some real-world examples there. The tree, to me, sort of signifies the tree of learning, if you will. So at its foundation, graphing skills are essential to being a successful economics student. You cannot get through an undergraduate degree in economics, even a graduate degree, without some basic graphing skills there. But students, that's also the biggest thing that trips up students, is the graphing. It's very foreign to them. So economics and graphs go hand in hand. An economics course without graphs is like a textbook without words. You have to have some graphing analysis in there. But of course, this is not going to be the same for everyone because I have small class sizes, maximum of 50, minimum of 25. And so I hold graphing workshops for them because I think it's very essential for students not only to know how to graph it, but the equation behind it and how do we arrive at that, and how do we calculate profit, for example. Yes, it's important to know how to graph that, but it's also important to know how to calculate that. So I wanted to obviously get students interested in economics just using their phone. I'm going to show you the website application to Instagram, which has a completely different look and feel to it. But anyone can sign up. It is free. You just need an email address and a password, and you can post as many pictures as you want. So during the first phase of this project, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while. And so I wanted to create an Instagram account for my students and call it Insta_graph_. Unfortunately, Instagraph was already taken, and the person that actually has that account, ironically, there are no graphs on that account. So that was a little disappointing that name was already chosen. But mine is full of graphs, however. So it's Insta_graph_. Update the account on a weekly basis by adding new graphs, real-world examples, and not a little economics humor, but a lot of economics humor. Because humor goes a long way, especially with students. So in terms of the results, it's been very well received so far. I have 175 students total, and 76% of them are following me. Now, was there an incentive to follow me? Well, it's sort of fun, but there was no real, there's not bonus points tied to it or anything of that nature. So it's just sort of something that I mentioned at the beginning of the semester. Hey, I started this new project, this new Instagram account for you guys, essentially. I don't follow any of my students. It's purely for their benefit there. But it's been well received so far. And I have a couple economics majors and enthusiasts internationally that have started following me. The second phase that I'm going to do is I want to, as of right now, continue to update the account each semester and invite new students to follow. Upload graphing videos eventually, because with Instagram, not only can you upload videos, but you can pictures. And then at the end of the semester, I want to survey students and just sort of collect some feedback. Was it useful? Was it a nuisance? Did you get anything out of it? So that is sort of something that I'm interested in finding out. And then I want to continue to update pictures and concepts based on current economic trends. So this is Instagraph. It's basically, so there's a lot of humorous pictures in there, which the students like. I don't get nearly as many likes on the concepts and the graphs that I'm covering. I do get likes on there, but who doesn't like cats, right? So I've got 147 followers right now, and I've posted 136 pictures. Notice that I'm following no one. So it's not for me to sort of snoop and stalk my students. I could care less. It's not for that. The purpose is for the students to get them engaged. I post all of my pictures of graphs prior to the lecture, and so they have something to look at and something to like before we actually talk about it and go over it and review it. What I found with students in terms of graphing, the graphs that they were copying down in their notes that I put on the board were completely different than what I had actually put on the board. So why was there this big disconnect there? Why were they copying things down incorrectly? Why were there labels missing? It was just sloppy work, essentially what it was. And so this was a way for them to sort of fact check and to go back and look at those graphs and say, oh yeah, I actually did leave off AD1 on that particular graph. Yeah, I did leave off the aggregate price level. So it's a way for them to study, and they've told me that before the tests, they actually utilize Instagraph very frequently, and especially with the graphs. I'm very graph heavy on exams. By the way, that's Wendy. She is an econ cat. So she's been with me for about 20 years now, and yeah, she's probably the smartest cat. She knows a lot about economics, just because she's heard me over the course of time, and that's her world, that's her life. So this is just an example of a video of the U.S. debt clock. And that's something that I always pull up and show students anytime we're talking about fiscal policy, and automatically you just get some big sighs. Oh my gosh. It is a little frightening, and it could potentially cause nightmares. But the students like to see that. So that's an example of just a short video that you can use. So there's a lot of humor there, and that's not why the account was created. But that's just to sort of keep the students somewhat interested. If we look at some more, so for example, whenever we talk about price discrimination, basically, I just pulled up a website, Fandango, just to discuss and talk about different movie prices, and how price discrimination by a movie theater can be very successful. And so that is certainly something, and you can see one of the students commented, senior discount, but no student discount. Who has more money? So that's an example of how you might apply that. Here is a graph for price discrimination with 3 different prices, perfect price discrimination. That was something that follows each weekly module. Just an example of a natural gas company, for an example of a graph for a regulated natural monopoly. The students really like that. I actually had, who was it that liked this picture? It was a natural gas company in England that gave me the thumbs up on this picture. Yeah, it's great. So occasionally you get some funny likes. So graph for a regulated natural monopoly. This is for Piedmont, which is the previous picture there. Students like to see sort of the application of that. And in terms of absolute versus comparative advantage, typically one of the exercises that I do for my face-to-face and my online classes, for my face-to-face classes, I'll tell them, okay, when we're talking about absolute and comparative advantage, what do you have with you right now? Look around you and see what you have. Just looking at your purse, your shoes, your glasses, your backpack, and look and tell me where it's made. So that's something that we do. And then we talk about, well, why is it made in China as opposed to the United States? And so we'll talk about many different examples, and I also do that for my online discussions as well. And so we talk about, and that's a good lead into the difference between absolute versus comparative advantage. I found something made in San Francisco. I remember this particular piece of garment was actually more money than I've ever paid for a jacket before. So that was a good example. So in terms of complements and substitutes, whenever you're talking about elasticity, just something that the student can actually relate to, and they can look around the house and see what types of complements and substitutes do they have, and what is the elasticity for those particular goods. So coconut sugar versus Truvia. Another good household example that one can use. Chips and salsa, coffee and coffee filters. Wendy gets tired. She just gets tired of all the economics from time to time. After 20 years, she's just done. And this is sort of a little bit, there's a story behind this. My very first day on the job teaching Principles of Macroeconomics class, one of my students said, yeah, is this even a real science? Because it seemed like a bunch of economic fluff to me, is what it seems like. And so basically, for all the faculty members in my department, I explained to them the story and that it's a tough sell for everybody, but I made everybody a little jar of fluff, just to remind them what they do. Because it's important. Of course, the concept of scarcity is something that we can all relate to.